Well, hello everybody, and welcome to our weekly message discussion. Hi, we want to help you take the concepts that we learned from the weekend message and apply them to your lives in a meaningful way. Typically, we would be in the studio doing this live, but because this is a holiday weekend, I'm Eric, and I'm here with Andrew. You want to say hi, Andrew?
Hey everybody, good to see you. It's really weird on Zoom calls. I talk louder, so I apologize.
Somehow you just start yelling. So I'm working from home, and Andrew's in the office right now. You're in the office right now?
Yeah,
Yeah.
I'm in the office following up with people, so
Yeah. So I
taking
would
care
say,
of business. I work all the time, Eric.
yeah, me too. Obviously, I'm online here, but so I would say to all of everybody watching, just kind of give us some grace in case a kid walks in or somebody knocks on the door for Andrew or anything like that. But we are hoping that you're enjoying your holiday weekend, or if you're watching us later on in the week, hopefully you had a restful weekend as well. We're in the middle of the series called Monsoon. Actually, we're at the end. This is the very last week for Monsoon. So,
Awesome.
Andrew, you want to give us just a background again of what we've been going through and where we're at this point in the series?
Yeah, this past 6 weeks has been amazing because we've been talking all about, man, where's God in the midst of the monsoons that we face in life? Because we always have those moments, don't we? Man, everything is ticking along great and everything is going good, and all of a sudden, from out of nowhere, just pain and tragedy and trials come. And you always ask the question, where's God in the midst of this? And so I think Todd, this has been one of my favorite series, Eric, that
Yeah,
he's done so far, because he has really just practically helped us to navigate some of those storms that come up in life and really how to deal with pain and suffering.
sure. Yeah, and think about all of the different stories that he's pulled from the Bible, like real
Yeah.
life examples of people that struggled through it and how God was in it in the midst of it. And not even like last week we talked about Moses, and then even the psalm that he wrote with it. And this week we're
Yeah.
going to be talking about another pretty famous Bible character and kind of what he's gone through as well. So we're going to be going through a few questions here from the small group curriculum. For anyone that doesn't know, Andrew, just tell us, and we're going to be talking about the importance of small groups later, but give us a brief overview of small groups, because we've kind of been hitting this all series long.
The whole series, bro, because it is our main mantra around here that life change happens best in the context of a small group. So we
Exactly.
believe that your life is going to be transformed not just when you come on weekend services. Weekends are great. We love to laugh at Todd's jokes. We love to sing the songs. We love all those different elements. But man, we know that your life is going to be radically transformed when you get into a small group. That's where the rubber meets the road. That's where people are going to ask you the tough questions. You're going to learn how to study God's word better, and you're going to develop a great group of people who just care about you and some relationships that you'll always value. So we're big about small groups, and man, you should be in one. That's why we're giving you a taste of it today.
That's right. So what you're going to do is see this. If you are watching on your own, you can go ahead and pause whenever you want and kind of write down the answers. This is premiering on Facebook as well, so you can enter in the comments and have a little bit of comment things going on in the Facebook window. We won't be able to answer this week, but you'll be able to see people answer back and forth there. And for some of you that are using this as your small group curriculum, feel free to pause and ask the group a question. And maybe if you're just hanging out at home right now, figure out who's in the house. If it's your spouse, your roommates, your kids, get them together and just start asking the questions, because we want these questions to be applicable for you, to help you, like we said, live out some of the principles from the weekend message throughout your daily life and make them something that you can apply. So we're going to typically start with an icebreaker, and I've got two icebreakers. The first one is, go ahead and just talk about what are you doing, or what were your plans for your Memorial Day celebration, Memorial Day weekend. And then secondly, related to the message, share a funny story about a time that you had to admit that something was your own fault. Andrew, let's go with the something that was your own fault.
For me, the something that was my own fault was, I remember when I was 19 years old, and I had just gotten my license when I was 16, but I had come home for the summer from school, and there were these young high school girls who were in my Oldsmobile Toronado. It was like 19 feet long, Eric. It was the biggest car you've ever seen. We were just driving around town, and I don't know why, but something got in my mind that I had a pair of sunglasses at night to put on while driving.
Uh-oh.
Not a good idea, Eric. So I put the sunglasses on. I started busting some rap music, which is totally me because I'm totally into rap music, as you can see. But I bumped the rap music. I put on the sunglasses in the middle of the night, and I went to make a left-hand turn, and I totally hit the curb so hard. Like, I mean, man, I hit the curb so hard that, man, the tire just kind of went up on the curb. And I kind of drove away real fast thinking that, oh, man, I've gotten out of this and everything like that. And the girls just laughed at me so hard. And I remember, getting home and thinking there was nothing wrong with it. But then the next morning, my dad woke me up and he said, hey, can we go outside real quick? And so he walked out front and he showed me the tire, and I had cracked the rim on the tire, and like it was just jacked up. And I remember my dad saying, did you do something crazy last night? I said, I don't remember, I mean, just hanging out and stuff, Dad, and everything like that. And he totally caught me, and it was my own dumb fault, bro. What about you?
Yeah, I mean, there's plenty of stories for me just like that, but I think the most consistent is I'm kind of a preemptive admitter of my own fault, because usually if someone's telling me something or there's a detail, I always forget it. Or when I ask somebody a question, I've gone through so many times where I've asked, hey, Andrew, I know we probably talked about this, and it's my own dumb fault that I didn't write it down, or I didn't remember it, or I was thinking about something else, or I was answering somebody's, Facebook message or something like that. And so I'm like a broken record of, I know it's probably my fault, but could you help me? And maybe it's because I spent, 20 years living in the Midwest, and I just kind of have that Midwest tendency to admit my own fault. But that's my life, is admitting I probably did something dumb here, but here's my question.
So, Ohio's finest, bro. Ohio's finest. That's what you are.
That's right. That's right. I was trained to be like that. That, as they would say out there, I come by it honestly. Anyway, this weekend, Todd talked about the story of Samson, who had a lot of things that were done in his life by his own dumb fault. Some of the bad decisions he made that ended up costing him big. So, Andrew, in what ways, can you give us like an overview of the Samson story? I know it's in Judges, but if you could give us an overview of the things that Samson had that were going on for him, that were going well, and then what were some of his greatest weaknesses that were holding him back?
Man, he had a lot going well for him. As we talked about this weekend, he had great parents who loved God, and supernaturally, he came into existence as God remembered his mom and dad. And man, he had good parents who cared deeply about the things of God. These are the type of parents who raised their kid in the church. These are the type of parents who really loved their son so very much. The other thing he had going for him was just incredible strength. I mean, man, he was like the Fabio, if you would. Fabio's not big anymore, is he? Like, I don't know. If Fabio's, no, so. Like, I can't believe it's not Butter's kind of over, right? So Todd shared The Rock, okay? So he's like The Rock, but with hair, okay? Like, he is muscular, he is big, and he has just this incredible strength. And he's also quite smart, too. I mean, man, his intelligence level was just high. And so he had a lot going for him. But with all those things comes some serious downfalls in Samson's life. I mean, he was very proud, and he was a narcissist. And man, he thought that he had it all together. He thought that he was hot stuff. And on top of that, he had kind of a wandering eye. Like he was into the ladies, if you will. Like, he liked all the other ladies from other communities that he probably shouldn't have associated with. And so he's just filled with lust. And the fact that he just didn't deal with it, man, he just kind of refused to really deal with some of his weak spots, really made him prone to making some really bad decisions. Yeah. And so that's kind of some background with him. Also in the book of Judges is just a sad book, because it's Israelite just constantly getting away from God and falling away over and over again. And now here's their hero, and he does the same thing. Right,
yeah. And it was kind of like there was so much potential there where you're thinking, man, this, imagine what could have happened, which we'll see here in a little bit. And so that's a good question that we can ask. So for all of you paying attention here, if you're watching with the group or answer in the Facebook comments as well, hit pause, journal about it. In what ways has God set you up to be effective for him? And what are some of your greatest weaknesses that you need to kind of watch out for? So what ways has God set you up to be effective? And then in what are some of those greatest weaknesses that you really need some help looking out for? What do you think, Andrew?
Yeah, for me, God's given me great parents, much like Samson. I had a great mom and dad who loved me and put lots of time and lots of effort into me. I grew up in a home where my mom went to church. My dad didn't, but my mom really was the one to guide us along into going to church. And later along, my dad gave his life to Christ and was radically changed by that. I had great parents, had great schooling too. I went to the Bible Institute of Los Angeles, which is known as Biola. and got a great education from there. And then later in seminary at Talbot, and man, got a great education. On top of that, have worked at some incredible churches along the way
Sure.
that have just poured into me. And so, man, I look at just my background, how God has set me up for success as a pastor. And
Yeah.
man, I'm grateful for that. Some of the areas of weakness that I have, and it's always been with me, Eric, has been my pride.
Mm.
And I've had to work through that over the years, and God keeps reminding me over and over again and breaks me of my pride. But
Sure.
that's a constant struggle for me, bro.
Yeah, no, I hear that. I think very similar for me too. You know, my parents are great, and you know, they raised us in a similar fashion. You know, set
Yeah.
me up for success type of thing. And then like my parents, they were raised Catholic and Lutheran. My dad was Catholic, my mom was Lutheran, and so when they got married, they kind of didn't worry about the whole religion thing. And then when I was in junior high, maybe, that's when, you know, we really started going to church as a family. I mean, it was kind of weird for me because I didn't grow up in the church.
Yeah.
So, you know, that whole, like, I didn't get any of the flannel graphs or anything like that. My first experience with church was
And you didn't
a
miss anything.
youth pass.
With the,
It was,
with,
yeah, well,
you didn't
it,
miss
well,
anything.
my first experience with a youth pastor with a goatee and a harmonica around his neck and an acoustic guitar with a flannel shirt, you know, because this was like the early 90s, and just chunking out some lame worship tunes. But like, you know, I gave my life to Christ in that youth group, mostly because I, you know, was on the ski trip, and it was, you know, a moment God hit me in the slopes there. But really, you know, God has, I think, set me up for success to be effective for him, mostly by helping me avoid bad situations. Like, I can't tell you how many times I've missed out, or I've said, wow, I'm so glad I was not in that situation, or I almost got in that car, or I almost went to that house, or I almost went to that party, or I was almost involved in that thing. And somehow God provided some intervention, whether it was, you know, a conscious type of thing, or whether it was somebody else intervening. I would say my greatest weakness is probably, I don't know if you want to call it temper or just quick reactions. You know, when I know that if I don't take the time to take a deep breath, to consider how I'm going to react, then things are not going to go well, which is super weird because, you know, email wise and social media wise, I feel like I'm good because I have time to formulate my thoughts and write them down and delete, and then do it again.
Yeah.
But in person, sometimes this thing will give away how I'm feeling
Yeah.
rather than me being able to get poker face and go, okay, it's not that big of a deal. You know, we can work on it. And so I need people in the room to go, hey, Eric, you know, in that meeting or in that interaction, that probably wasn't, maybe you need to swing around and say sorry to that person. So I've been working really hard on that, and it's really been helpful to have people around to help me with that. So,
Yeah.
which that brings us to our next question, you know, because Todd talked about this, but in this past weekend, Todd said, you know, he asked the question, how does a person wreck their life? They really do it one step at a time.
Yeah.
And I think, you know, you had the number 56,000 steps that Samson used, but one foolish choice at a time leads to another foolish choice and another, and another, and another. So the question for you is, how have you seen this in your own life or in the lives of others?
Yeah, I've seen this in my own life. Man, the times where I fall into bad decisions, it usually isn't the circumstances. It was a series of other things that led up to that moment. And man, as a pastor, I see this all the time because a lot of people arrive at situations where they're just like, I don't know what happened. I mean, I just, you know, I winded up at the girl's house and this took place and all these other things where you have to go back to, well, what actually took place? And you start to go, okay, well, I stopped going to church, right? Is usually the first thing. Well, I stopped going to church, and then I stopped going to small group, and I stopped, you know, reading my Bible regularly, and I stopped spending time with God. And so I just kind of fell away. And a lot of people do that, right? They just begin taking one small step away from God slowly but surely. And then after a while, they realize that, man, they're just neck deep in sin. And I've seen that over and over in my life too, as well, Eric, where, man, I've made one dumb decision and then that led to another and another and another, whether it be, you know, just a small little white lie that I tell that just grows and grows and grows until it's uncontrollable anymore. And man, I've seen that in the lives of others where they have just train wrecked their whole life, one small decision at a time. What about you?
Yeah, I totally agree. I mean, I don't know who coined the phrase. I'm sure it was somebody else, but, you know, essentially, like, nobody Nobody wakes up one morning and says, I want to have an affair. You know,
Yep.
nobody wakes up one morning and says, I want to be in financial trouble, or nobody wakes up one morning and says, I'm going to be a terrible dad that has no relationship with their kids.
Yeah.
You know, it is those incremental steps that get you there. And sometimes those steps that you don't even see. And I think that's why that last question, talking about the group thing, like there are probably things that I can't see. Well, I know there are things that I can't see in my own life, the steps that I'm taking, that I need somebody else who can walk alongside me, who has a different view and can say, hey, that step may not be putting you into debt right now, or that step may not be destroying a relationship or whatever it happens to be. But down the road, if you're not careful, it's going to lead you there. So, I mean, I'm there. And you can even think like, let's take it out of kind of the spiritual realm and put it into, you know, your diet or your physique. You know, it's like the day that I wake up and I say, I'm not going to work out today. That's one step towards making poor health choices. I'm going to have the extra donut. I'm going to what, and none of those individually.
The donut sounds delicious right now, by the way.
Right. Yeah, well, none of those individually are going to take you down, right? I mean, have the donuts, skip the workout, but just know that every one of those might be one of those 56,000 steps that we heard from Samson, where he walked all the way into sin. And how many opportunities do you have to turn around and to say, I'm not going to do this?
Yeah. And I liked what Todd said too. He talked about how close do you really get to the fire? And that's what he brought out this weekend, really, of just, man, so many people think about how close can I get to where I'm still okay, I'm still good with God, and I'm still doing all right, but man, how close can I get to that? And we have to set those standards that really move us away from it, to where it's that first initial step where, man, I'm calling a friend and I'm saying, man, I need help with this.
Yeah.
And I can't stop this, you know, and just asking for somebody to be involved in that conversation, I think is so important.
Right, 100%. And I think between the name's escaping me now, but there's Andy Stanley's, right. He's talked about guardrails, and then boundaries is by
Henry Cloud.
Henry Cloud. Oh gosh,
it's got you, dude.
It's on my shelf back here somewhere.
You can see it,
but like the concepts in those two books, and I think even Craig Michelle has a book about it too. But like, you set up a guardrail before you get to whatever the danger is, and I think too many of us want to try and get so close to the danger. And how many times where, you know, especially when I was leading like teens and stuff, where they ask, or young adults, where they ask you, well, like technically what's a sin? Like, and it's like the worst, most awkward conversations. Well, if I spend my money on this, is that a sin? Or, you know, if I do this with my girlfriend, is that a sin? And you're like, bro, that's the wrong question to ask. It shouldn't even be asking that.
Correct.
And so I mean, I love that conversation too, is like, what are the decisions that we're making that get us to where we want to go and keep us off of the road of sin, instead of trying to figure out how close can we shave it before we get to the line.
Correct.
So anything else on that?
No, dude, I think we covered it. I got it.
So then let's look at Judges 16 verses 28 through 30. So if you guys are watching along, pull out a Bible, pull out your Bible app, write it down for later. But that's kind of, you know, that'll give you a good idea of where we're at. But here we go. This is, oh wait, no, before we get there, sorry, look at me. We're on Zoom. Can't even edit this out. Let me ask you this question, Andrew, before we get to that. Why do you think God allows us to go through the monsoons that are the result of our bad decisions? Why even go through that point, and discuss that as a group too?
Yeah, I think we have to learn that it's our own fault. And I know for me, that's the opportunity for me to humble myself. And over again, you know, we see people who were very prideful in Scripture, whether it was Adam and Eve choosing to go their own way, or whether it was Abraham trying to get ahead through lying. You know, all of them really had to struggle with this idea of, you know, pride. And a lot of times that idea of God allowing us to go into situations where we have to say it was my own dumb fault is really to humble us, and is really for us to just slow down, slow our roll, and realize that He is God. We are not. We find in Scripture, right, that God opposes the proud. And that's hard. When you oppose the proud, when the God of the universe opposes the proud, your life is not going to be easy. But on the other hand, He gives grace to those who are humble. And that's what I've loved to see in my own life, as I've tried to not be a big deal, and I've tried to just let go of my pride, that God blesses that. And you can see that in life. Those people who step up and who are arrogant and proud, they usually have a way of God just bringing them down low. And that's sad to see, but that's just the way that God works.
Yeah. I think, and you brought this up too, but the tough thing is, like, for someone like you who's you're at the Riverside campus and you've been on stage before and
Yeah.
you're doing this and like, it's your, oh, by the way, happy birthday, being your birthday last week,
Oh,
and
thank
all of your Facebook friends on the birthday thing. And so even as much as you try to go, like, I'm trying not to be a big deal, yet God puts you closer and closer and closer to situations where it's like, there's that, hey, prove it, Andrew. Like, you're not a big, there's so many opportunities that you could just take and go, yes, I am a big deal. Look at me. I'm so important. And I think that that's also one of the reasons why, for me, why does God put me through those monsoons? It's like, I think when I answered before about my weak spot is I tend to take things as being more important than they are. Right.
Yeah.
I think that helps me with God putting me through these monsoons to go like, hey, this was your own dumb fault. I'm still here walking with you. And so I'm not going to let you perish because of this. I'm not going to let, it be irreparable damage because of this, but you're going to learn from it. And you're going to learn that I take this much calmer than you do, Eric. And I think, like I'm seeing that with my kids too. So there's a huge thing that happens with my kids and it's like, oh my God, it's the end of the world to them. But because I have the perspective, I get to go, no, it's going to be fine. We're going to work, or my wife and I will stop and we'll go, we'll let them work it out, let them work it out and see what happens. And
let them fight it out, Eric. Just let them fight it out and work it out.
Yeah. Or, I mean, hey, we ask, hey, how do you think that's going to go for you? And they work through that. And it's like, sometimes you can't just be told to do something. You have to either see it in someone else or you have to experience it yourself.
Yeah, I'm not advocating for my kids fighting, but obviously they have to figure out for themselves. And sometimes my kids choose the hard road, and I'm no different. I'm the same way with God. Sometimes I'll choose the hard road, and God will have to bring me down low. And that's kind of what he had to do with Samson in Samson's story. Is Samson chose this way of destruction, and God had to bring him down to that lowest perspective and that lowest place. So
yeah, so he spent some time in prison for the Philistines.
yeah,
He's blind at this point, and these are so his life has not gone probably the way his parents hoped, the way he hoped, and he had to face a couple of monsoons because of it. So now we're in Judges 16, 28 through 30. It says here, then Samson prayed to the Lord, sovereign God, remember me, sovereign Lord, remember me again, O God. Please strengthen me one more time. With one blow, let me pay back the Philistines for the loss of my two eyes. Then Samson put his hands on the two center pillars that held up the temple, pushing against them with both hands. He prayed, let me die with the Philistines. And the temple crashed down on the Philistine rulers and all the people. So he killed more people when he died than he had during his entire lifetime. There's some context here that we missed. So what do you think caused Samson to refocus on his commitment to God? Talk about that in the comments. You can pause it, talk about it as a group. What do you think caused Samson to refocus?
yeah, I think he had to come to that place where he realized just the folly of his ways. He had, gotten caught in his relationship with Delilah and had his head shaved in the midst of that, so he loses all of his strength. And so now he's to that point where he is at an utter end. I mean, he's basically grinding on a millstone all day long. But what I love about this is, right, the Bible says that his hair began to grow. He began to start thinking through and processing all of his life before. God had brought him to that lowest place so that he'd turn back to him. And as I'm reading through the Bible this year, I see that all the time where God allows people to come to that place where they actually humble themselves. And when they do, God is so gracious and he is so welcoming in that he says, hey, come back to me, and they make that decision and God begins to change them and offers grace. So.
Yeah, I love that. And we talked about that last week with Moses on kind of like, if you're not dead, you're not done yet. And, even though you think you're going through all these trials and, you mentioned last week with Moses, like 40 years, he was over the hill. He was an old man by the time God called him to say, hey, I need you to do one of the greatest things that has ever been done, in the history of the Israelites to that point. And the same thing is true here with Samson, where for anyone else, you could look at the story. He had all this potential, 56,000 steps and countless more bad decisions. He bragged and boasted about his strength being from his hair and him being so strong, kind of losing focus on God. than to be so prideful that he gave away his secret,
Yeah,
so to
dude.
speak. And then now he's captured by the Philistines,
Yep.
can't see. That should be the end. I mean, really, like for all of us who go like that, yeah, you deserve it. Like how many of us are going, you deserve that, Samson. You should die in prison and be a mockery of the Philistines. And yet God says, nope, I'm not done with him yet. And not only am I not done with him, but it says here in verse 30, the temple crashed down on the Philistine rulers and all the people. So he killed more people when he died than he had during his entire lifetime. So this dude who was the equivalent of The Rock or Fabio or Arnold Schwarzenegger or Rambo,
Yeah.
right? Like go through whatever era you were involved in. Go through that. The body count that he had as far as what he was doing, it's like it paled in comparison to when he was already washed up and turned back to God and said, God, I screwed up one more time. Let me serve you. And God said, okay, here's your opportunity, and put him in a position where he could make a huge impact right there. So what caused him to refocus to his commitment with God? I mean, my answer would be all of those years spent blind in prison and mocked by the people that he was so prideful against. And so going through that monsoon helped him turn back. Now, would I counsel somebody and say, well, you know what? It's a good thing that you sinned and God put you through all those punishments because that helped you turn back? No, of course not. You could go back and go like, God would probably have Samson not do all those things.
Correct.
But I think that speaks to the grace and the goodness of God to have him go, yeah, I'm going to give you another chance. So that was it for me. So the questions we want to ask, Andrew, for everybody watching at home, everybody that's tuning in, is how can you refocus on your commitment to God so you do not make the same mistakes that Samson made? What do you
This was really good for me and so practical. But for me, I've got to keep the safeguards in my life. So I know where I'm weak, Eric, and I've got to know those things that are a weakness for me, and I got to stay away from them, and I got to put up a guard so that I don't walk into those things. And then I've got to hold to those standards and not violate them and not walk with them. And man, I know, Eric, I can't do that without a group of people who are asking me hard questions. And I've shared before on this, man, I got a great group of guys that I meet with every Wednesday for lunch. And they are a great group of guys who ask me hard questions. And they will ask me how I'm doing with a lot of those standards that I've set. And that really helps me to think twice before making bad decisions, because I know that they're going to ask me about it. And I'm going to have to go, and I'm going to have to feel very uncomfortable as a pastor confessing all those areas where I've been weak this week. And so, man, that really keeps me on the straight and narrow. And I know as well, there's a lot of people who think, oh, man, it could never happen to me. I could never fall, or I could never fall into this. But I just know how human I am, Eric. And I know that, man, I am one step away from making a really bad decision. So I've got to have those people all the way back at square one who keep me on the straight and narrow. What about you, bro?
Yeah, I agree with that. I think I would take a step into what you're saying there, because I think we're on the same page here. But I think being honest about stuff is important, because when we start to hide things from people, or even things that we don't think is a big deal, like for instance, I mean, I'll just take a couple of these safeguards here, because we're digital, because we have these things in our pockets, right? Like obviously I have a password on my phone, but my wife knows the password on my phone. Right. And anytime my wife, or I mean, essentially any of my close friends wants to see what's on my phone, they can see it. So that means text messages from people, anything like that. Same thing with my Facebook password. Like I have a Facebook password. Anytime my wife wants to get into my Facebook to see what direct messages there are, emails, any of that stuff, it's open. And there's not a sense of like, well, there's a lack of trust here or there. For me, that's what helps the trust be there, because I know at any point, if I wanted to see her phone, it's open.
Yep.
Right. And so some of these other things, and I know that there's other people in my life that are like, hey, let me see your internet browsing history.
Ooh, yeah.
Right. Okay.
That's awesome.
And that doesn't have to be the things that you're thinking, bad, but I mean, any amount of it. It's like, what sort of investments are you making? How are you spending your money? Things like that. You have conversations over that. How are you spending your time? It's like any of that stuff is open, and it's not. And now I think the conversation, especially with like where we're at politically now, you could talk about, well, what are your freedoms? Well, yeah, I know I have a bunch of freedoms, but I know that some of those freedoms are going to get me in trouble if I
Right.
exercise those freedoms. So I also have the freedom to set up those boundaries, just like you said. So helping people, not in accountability wise, because I think I'm some sort of monster that's going to go crazy in certain areas, but just to also go, hey, I just don't ever want it to happen. I,
Mhm.
I want a boundary at 5,000 steps
Yep.
instead of 56,000 steps.
Correct. And I love that we have small groups to do that at church, and we have Living Free for those people who are really struggling, or man, you've just got some hurt that you're working through. We've got groups that really help with all
Yeah.
sorts of different things, whether that be pornography or whether that be anger or whether that be just grief or finances or whatever, people's issues are. We can keep you accountable to stay on the straight and narrow. And so, man, I love that Rick does a great ministry, and I love that we've got our Living Free program here just to help people who are in
Yeah.
groups.
And I would encourage too, that's the other piece is, um, of being honest, is not only on the front end, but the back end too. Like,
Right.
don't think that you have to be, arrested for substance abuse to get help.
Yep.
Right. And I think like you mentioned earlier, like, okay, there's that line, oh, I'm just going to one more time do this or this lie or spend money on this or go here or talk to this person. But it's like essentially, eh, have that group of people or be willing to be open and honest and say, hey, maybe I need some help. And I think the other conversation is if you're with someone else, like let's say you have a roommate, a spouse, a significant other, and if they're going through something, don't be so prideful to think that you don't have to get help as well. Because if my wife is going through something, it's affecting me. If my family is going through something, it's affecting me. And that's going to affect the way that I'm going to make decisions too. So I would say probably the people closest to Samson also needed help as well, not just Samson.
Yeah, I would agree with you, bro.
So next steps, keep attending online, keep attending church, because you want to make sure that you keep getting that positive connection with God and the community. Join a small group if you haven't joined a small group
Yeah.
already. And for some of you going like, no, I'm good. Me and God are good all by ourselves, or I'm better handling this on my own. Like, we just went through a whole sermon on pride. Like, let that pride go, get
Let it go.
involved with other people. Imagine if Samson and Delilah were in the room there and Samson had a buddy that he could talk to and go, man, she tied me up last night. And then all the Philistines came like, whoa, we need to talk about this. Maybe we need to.
You've got some issues in your relationship, bro. Like, you just need that person who's going to be able to say that.
Yeah, exactly. He needed somebody to step into his life on that. So join a small group. For some of us, we need a recovery group. And so you could get into Living Free and check that out. And then like, Pastor Todd said this weekend, it's like, if you don't have your relationship with Jesus right, maybe you've been walking a million steps in the wrong direction and you've never actually gone the right way. Now's the time. You could text the word Sagebrush to 97,000. And you could enter something into the chat and say, hey, I just need to talk to somebody. And one of our pastoral team members will connect with you and talk about your relationship with Christ. What else, Andrew? Anything else before we leave this week?
No, I think we're good. I just want to say to everybody out there, thank you for watching this. Happy Memorial Day. We're so thankful for those soldiers who paid that ultimate sacrifice and for all those veterans and people who have served in the armed forces. Man, we appreciate you guys, and we appreciate everything that you've done so that we can be free. So God bless you guys.
Yeah, same here. And make sure to tune in tomorrow for Q&A with our time with Todd at noon. So, Andrew, let's say goodbye.
Bye-bye, everybody.